Bulavinaka, Fiji, and a warm welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Louise Kaunisela, and my guest today is Karen Walsh, a psychologist, specialist in leadership and people development, business advisor, international conference speaker, and also executive coach. And she's been working in Fiji for 10 years for some companies like RBF, Ministries, Vinod Patel, and Westpac, for example. She has a long background in working with women and domestic violence, and in 2005 helped the Australian government set up the 1-800 toll-free line and spent a year training 900 counsellors on the line. A warm welcome, Karen Walsh, to Speak Your Mind.
Well, Vanaka, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's wonderful to be here.
Great. Now, I spoke about how you have a long history with domestic violence. But first of all, you say you're passionate about women. Why, Karen?
I think it's a whole long, real thing about my life. I've always worked with women. I've always coached women. I've always trained women. And I think that women have so much to offer and so much that they can contribute to the world that sometimes I actually don't think that they realize the true value that they have.
That's so true.
So I sort of thought to myself, well, I have a lot of knowledge around this and I'm luckily skills. And I thought I would actually try as much as I possibly can to help women around the world.
Oh, it's so nice talking to you. I mean, I just pick up from you that you have a wonderful energy. You're a very happy person, and it's catchy. I mean, but for you to be working in a place like domestic violence, it must have been really hard for you because, I mean, to see the reality of what women go through, I mean, in the world around, it's not only in Fiji, but how bad is domestic violence in Fiji?
Look, I think domestic violence is sadly a problem around the world. Domestic violence, by definition, is the power and control of one person over the other. I might also say right now that domestic violence happens both ways. Even though it's 4-1 men on women, you also get women who do perpetrate domestic violence. I need to say that at the outset.
Yes.
In Fiji, my understanding from your Minister of Women, Poverty Alleviation and Children is that it's sitting at about 64% right now. And 64% is extraordinarily high per capita. Even though Fiji is a small country, per capita, it's very, very high. And it creates a lot of problems, not only for, obviously, women and families, children, but for the economy, for the country overall. And I think it's something that really needs to be very, very rapidly looked at and dealt with because it's becoming an increasing problem in many organizations and also countries around the world.
I see. So, I mean, you've had experience as well in Australia. You trained 900 counselors, and you must have, I mean, even in Fiji, you've seen how bad it is. And what do you think can be done about it?
Look, I think that there's many things that can be done, Louise, but I honestly believe that, domestic violence is very multi-layered. It's very complex. So to say, well, we're just going to go and educate people and stop domestic violence, it's not going to happen that way. Culturally, historically, politically, religiously, there's so many things that divide the genders. And ultimately, in some cultures, with respect to overseas cultures, women are seen as commodities, possessions. Yes. So if they say what they're not supposed to, or the male of the house says that they shouldn't be behaving in a way, then it's stopped abruptly. So there's a lot that can be done. First and foremost, legislation against any form of domestic violence with some measures around consequences. So if you do perpetrate domestic violence, then there's got to be a consequence to that. So legislation, certainly education of young men and young girls at school with a focus on men and how to treat women well, your mothers, your grandmothers, your sisters, and also I think communities, where communities in villages in Fiji and in communities and in organizations, in families, that we talk about respectful behavior towards both genders and also the ability to really try and work problems out. So, often it's around frustration and around often booze, substance abuse. So I think it's a long time thing that we have to think about, but more strategies, more ways forward, more education, more legislation to start.
Yes, I mean, for a woman going through domestic violence, it's an awful thing. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, they sometimes feel trapped in the relationship. I mean, sometimes you see them, getting bashed up. What are the reasons for this that they just can't get away?
I think there's many, but in my experience of working in this field for so long, the key things would be, number one, that she doesn't have the means, so she might not have the finances to get away.
Yes.
And therefore, better the devil I know than the one I don't, so I stay.
Right.
The other reason that she would leave, if she has a reason, largely in my experience, are children. So often if I'm working with women and they say, but I want to stay, I love him, even though he hits and hurts me, the problem is that children often get killed in the process.
I mean, it just happened this year for us, the poor little baby, only 4 months old. I mean, the man threw a concrete brick, aiming that brick at his wife, and then it hit the poor child.
And it happens a lot of the time. So that's one of the reasons that often will get them going. But what keeps them there is better the devil I know than the one I don't, a lack of money, a lack of support. So if I go, where do I go and who do I go to? Although what I love about Fiji is that it's very community minded. So they could maybe go back home to the village or, go back to their family. But that's also complex because villages are people, we are a collective people.
Yeah.
We live together. So if a woman and her children does go back to the village, then it's kind of everybody gets involved in it, and it's more collective and can be quite difficult. But I think also I often get well, I love him. I've always loved him. And
She
I say, but
thinks she
hold
loves
on.
him, maybe.
Well, I say, well, he's just broken your nose. How can you love somebody who breaks your nose? And she'll say, well, he's my husband. And of course, could also be things like religion, till death us do part. So it's very complex. It's money, it's faith, married to death us to part. It's not knowing any better. I mean, some women, frankly, Louise, have been living in toxic relationship for so long that they no longer recognize that they're living in a relationship that doesn't work. It's become their normal.
True.
And therefore they continue their normal. And most of the time it's when I question about the safety of children that potentially we can move her over that.
Yes.
But not always. So there are many reasons why she stays.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about how children, they're the ones that have to suffer, going through all the domestic violence. And you even have men who grow up and talk about their experience as a child, having a mother who was, viciously beat up because she wouldn't be listening to her man.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies around the impact of domestic violence or domestic abuse on children, and some of those are around things like the psychological impact. Lots of children turn to depression, anxiety, a sense of powerlessness because I can't stop what's going on. There's a lot of fear in the family. Often you'll find that those children don't perform well at school. They become more reserved and introverted. Medically, they could get regular headaches, backaches. Also socially, they no longer they could be quite outgoing as children, but they no longer come out of their shell and play at school or, are heard in the playground because they almost it's like they're withdrawing back into their shell. So there's so many negative effects of domestic violence on children and, of course, death.
Exactly. On Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. We'll be back shortly.